So first of all, let me say that I'm glad that we are starting this mini-series. That it's something that last year, after some meetings on campus with some religious leaders, just by chance in a way, in some of the workshops or events that we organize, I thought it was nice to learn more about what they are doing on campus, because we see them around, but frankly, we don't have an idea about, I mean, we have some idea, but not a complete idea about what you and your colleagues are doing. And then I talked to Catherine and Julie, and the reason Catherine is because she's involved in the organization of the Wednesday Center, and Julie because I know she's very interested in religion, and she will tell more about that. And so we said, why we don't organize this series? And that is why we started. And as Catherine said, this year we will have 4 religious leaders. I don't know if you like to be called leaders, but that is the way they are called at Duke. And then if we see that people are interested, I'm sure we are, the people are interested, we will continue next year.
Throughout my seminary days, I had a few moments where I sort of had to own my vocational story a little bit more, and came close to saying, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this?" But I believe God's goodness is rich, very rich, and I have been ordained now this year 30 years, and would not trade that for anything. I feel that I've been blessed immeasurably, and hope that my life has somehow been a blessing for others. I've been, as was said, I've been in education almost my entire ministry. I was back in one of our high schools in Buffalo, New York. I was there for 5 years, and then I was sent back to my old high school. So I was the headmaster of my old high school, and I encourage anyone, if you ever get the opportunity to do that, do it. It's great fun. I would say it's the justice moment of signing contracts of teachers that taught me. Like, how do you like me now? So I was finishing up. I had been there 16 years. It was time to move on, and I went to speak with my provincial, who's our sort of Franciscan religious superior. I don't really call the shots of where my assignments are. And 2 days before our meeting, he had received a call from the Bishop of Raleigh saying that the position of the director of the Duke Catholic Center was opening up, and did he have anyone in mind? And he said, I think this would be a great match. And so here I am. I probably went more micro than maybe I should have, but yeah, so that's what got me here.
That's great. What difference do you see in working with high school versus college students?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting. I came here. I had run a high school. It was a $9 million operation. There were, at the time, about 80 employees. I got the management side, and I thought, add 1 year, and I'm dealing with the same students. How tough can it be? It really took me about 2.5 years to realize I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was doing. And so to answer your question, it's hugely different, And for all the reasons that you all being, cogent thinkers can imagine, but this dull bulb, it took me 2.5 years to figure out that it was different. So I would say primarily the coming of age dynamic that takes place in college is, to me, the critical difference. And it's a sink or swim reality, in particular for undergrads, where no longer under the roof of mom and or dad, and now I'm calling my own shots, and so that ownership moment is vital, particularly as it relates to my own faith identity. And so, that I think is where I didn't measure well the difference, but the difference is huge. One area that I believe Duke doesn't do well is, I think Duke continues to communicate the message of do it all. Do it all. And never gives a second thought around if we do this, what will the ripple effects be on the psyche of our student body? And so the messaging is always about do this and look at orientation week. I mean, orientation week is, to me, an absolute neon flashing light that says, Houston, we have a problem. We are going to just cram this thing full of activity where we will bombard them with messaging and messaging and more messaging. And then we wonder why the rest of the semester they're running around trying to figure out what to do next.
So one thing we are interested is also your role here in collaboration with other religious leaders, and which is something really particular for because we are a university and there are different faiths and non-faiths, etc.
Sure.
So what is the relationship with the others, and do you do a lot of seminars together? Do you discuss about student problems or even non-problems, just student lives?
Yeah, I will say that, again, when I talk to some of my colleagues at other peer institutions, we're blessed. We, religious life here at Duke, there are 27 different religious denominations that are acknowledged by the university. We all sign a document that we will not proselytize on campus. We are, any student that comes to us, to inquire about any of our faiths, we're more than welcome to walk with them. We, as a group of, and it's interesting, even the term campus ministry doesn't really apply for, for some of our faith traditions, like the Hindus, to say campus minister just is it's not even the proper term, and you'll hear about that, in your next iteration of this. So even some of those, as
We're Christianizing.
Christianizing stuff, right? Exactly. So, I have I think, a really good working relationship with, a good number. We meet every other Thursday morning from 9 to 10. As you may know, that Duke is unique in that we have the Duke Chapel. There's a dean at the dean level of the university. There's a dean of Duke Chapel, and so under that, there's a director of religious life. Actually, she's new, Catherine Lester-Bacon. She just started about a week and a half ago. But there's been a long tradition at Duke of really welcoming some different religious denominations, and so I think we have a great relationship. At the same time, the challenge of working with other folks in other religious denominations is twofold. One is there's the interfaith work or interreligious work that goes on between the ministers, which I think is healthy and good. The challenge comes in when you're trying to do that, particularly with undergraduates. I think graduate and professional students are in a little better position to be able to do it, but to have interreligious dialogue presupposes a knowledge of your own particular religious denomination. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing, at least for Catholic students, and I would say this is probably a lot of mainline Protestant denominations as well, but even evangelicals, that students are coming to us woefully undereducated in their own faith. And so, but how they have been schooled is in a sense of acceptance of the beauty of other of groups that are different than their own and other religious traditions. So if you get a group of undergrads in this room here and you ask the question, how many of you would think that interreligious or interfaith dialogue or ecumenical dialogue is a good thing? Everybody raises their hand. And if you say, how many of you think we should do something with other faiths, some sort of dialogue, everybody raised their hand and says, yes, that's great. So then you schedule and you create this interfaith dialogue moment, and 4 people show up, and it's the 4 people you knew who were going to show up, it's not, that issue is driven somewhat by the whole, I'm over programmed to begin with, but the other is, how can I go and have a cogent conversation with someone else of their faith when I can't speak, cogently about my own? And these are young people who are, splitting atoms, like they're doing some really wild and deep and intellectually strenuous work. These aren't, folks, at the other end of the bell curve. I mean, these are people who are knowledgeable. And the last thing that Duke students like to admit is what they don't know. We've all, I think, any of us that are engaged with, whether it be your own children or with students here, and
ourselves.
Or ourselves, right, right. When somebody slaps you and says, that's not a crisis. That's you being, overly dramatic, But I think there's times when, any of us, and I wouldn't do this physically or even emotionally, but find a way to shake them a little bit and say, listen to yourself, will you? And oftentimes the best way to do it, I think, is sometimes in humor to say, come on, is this really a crisis? So some of that dials down, turns the heat down a little bit. That said, that doesn't minimize the real crises that are out there that are, that I do see. Oftentimes I'll have students that, and it's funny, coming from a background where I was the headmaster, dealing with, discipline with students, or having to expel students, and I mean, just hated all that nonsense. And now, like, I don't want to say I don't care what they do, but I'm there to help pick up the pieces. Like, that's like a fun, not a fun part of my job, but I'm glad I don't have to worry about what they're doing, and I'll be there to hold their hand through the crisis. But I find that the university, I believe, has tremendous resources, more so than the culture at large. And so helping students to avail themselves of the resources while they're here, but also to begin to understand that this type of web of resources isn't always, that's not real. That's not the real world in which most of us live, and so helping them to bridge that moment to, okay, if you weren't here at Duke, what would that look like? And a similar dynamic happens for us just in the spiritual journey, where students who are very engaged during the semesters and then they go somewhere for the summer and their spiritual life falls apart. And, I say to them, you better get used to the fact that once you walk off this campus, that's what the rest of the world's like, and it's on your shoulders. So don't always be looking for these structures. So I think it's this both and of, providing them with the resources through crisis, but also strengthening their own immune system, their own autoimmune system, to be able to walk through difficulty and come out, I won't say whole on the other side, because we always come out a little chipped and broken and on the other side, but there is another side, and to help them to see that you'll make it through this too,
Give them some armor.
Give them, exactly, and some hope, just some hope. And that, hey, oftentimes I'll tell stories of my own failure. Like I'm 57, I'm to a point where I can talk about stupid things I did and that got me in trouble, and if it ends up in the Chronicle, it ends up in the Chronicle. I don't care. But, I can tell those stories, and, what are they going to do to me, And so to say, I did stupid things, too, and there's life after stupid, That'll be my book title.
There's life after
Life after stupid, The autobiography of a campus minister,
Well, I think we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You can follow Father Mike at The Duke Priest on Twitter if you're interested, and check out his podcast. I want to invite everyone back next week. We're going to have a program with Samantha Abrams from Columbia University. She's going to be speaking on collecting the web collaboratively, web archiving, and the Ivy Plus Libraries Confederation, which Duke is a part of that confederation. So join us next week, Wednesday, same time, same place. Thank you.